This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Just a good-looking man, and any bar mate can be a star mate if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood!
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. To find he is a wizard of a wiz, if ever a wiz there was. If ever a wiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle, back again for my second journey through this into this pod, and today we're going back in time. Of course, my first one I touched on a more recent film from 2025, but now for this episode we're going to go all the way back to the 1930s for arguably one of the most important films made back in that time, and it's definitely one of my favorites of all time when I was little, and definitely wanted to get to touch on it here again. That film, of course, is The Wizard of Oz. This, of course, based off the Wonderful Wizard of Oz novel by L. Frank Baum, released on August 25th, 1939, at a budget of $2.8 million. Box office originally made $29.7 million. Of course, stars Judy Garland, Ray Bolger, Jack Haley, Bert Lahr, Frank Morgan, Billy Burke, Margaret Hamilton, Charlie Grapewin, Pat Walshy, and in an uncredited, a couple of uncredited cameos, Adriana Caselotti and Candy Candido, who were just voices. And, of course, this film was definitely one of the, I guess, like I said, one of the most historically important films of all time, released back then. It's, still considered one of the greatest of all time, even though when it first came out in 1939, it was considered a bit of a disappointment. I think they expected it to do a lot more for it to do a lot more in its initial run. Of course, it wouldn't be until it made its debut on television in 1956 that it would become kind of the cultural icon that we know it today. And of course, as we know in the current day, The Wizard of Oz has definitely kind of made more of an impact thanks to the two Wicked films that have come out. The first one, of course, in 2024, the second one in 2025, and it's kind of brought, it's obviously brought this film back into the forefront. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards when it first came out. It would win Best Original Score and Best Original Song for Over the Rainbow. It also earned Judy Garland an Academy Juvenile Award for her performance in this film, as well as there was another film that had come out the same year. Let me just grab that quick. It was because I know it came out. I remember it was her and Mickey Rooney. Babes in Arms was the other film, and that's what earned her that award. So, like I mentioned in my the very first one, I do have a couple of categories that I have here. So I'm going to go ahead and start off first with with what I thought were the 3 things that worked and 3 things that didn't work in this film. So we'll start with the 3 things that worked. Number 1. I really enjoy how, even though this is not the first film that used color, it's kind of the one that's become symbolic most of the color of using color, because obviously for those that watch, anytime they're in Kansas, it's all in black and white, and then whenever we're in Oz, it's in color. So I thought that was a really good little touch there, particularly the scene after when Dorothy lands in Oz for the first time, and while she's still in the house, it's still in black and white, but then as she steps outside into the world of Oz, it then becomes color. So I thought that was a really, really good touch there. It really kind of emphasized, the difference in these places that Dorothy's at, which will come into play later. Number 2, having the dual roles, I thought was a really nice touch there. Of course, that being specifically Bolger, Haley, Lahr, and Morgan, and also Hamilton, who all played real people in Kansas. Bolger, Haley, and Lahr were, of course, the farmhands, and Hamilton was, of course, Miss Gulch, and Morgan was Professor Marvel, and then we, of course, see him again in Oz. as these as these weird characters, as these interesting these different characters here. And the fun fact real quick is that speaking of Ray Bolger specifically, when he was cast, he originally was supposed to be the Tin Man, and they originally had wanted Buddy Ebsen to play the Scarecrow, but apparently Bolger had seen had seen this The Wizard of Oz in theaters, and it was because of the performance of his hero Fred Stone, who had played the Scarecrow in the stage performance, that Bolger wanted to be the Scarecrow in the film. So they ended up switching around, and Ebsen then got Ebsen was fine with that, and then he was supposed to be the Tin Man, but because of the complications of the makeup, which I'll mention a little bit later, he ended up leaving it, and then Jack Haley became the Tin Man. So some interesting little behind the scenes notes there. And then the third thing, this film pretty much would become like the standard bearer for what we would know as the movie musical, or the musical movie, as it were. I'm sure there have been a couple of before that, but this is the one. But this film, I think, is usually the one that gets credited for by kind of starting that mold, and for good reason. There's a lot of really fun songs in it, but of course, whenever you think of The Wizard of Oz, you immediately think of Judy Garland's performance of Over the Rainbow. It's just such a iconic moment, and just such a great performance by her, and it's definitely one that still stands the test of time. I mean, like I said, it won that song ended up winning the Academy Award for Best Original Song. So, So I think, and it's, one of the most covered songs of all time. I mean, you hear some of the greatest performances by it, but I think, but again, when you think of the song, you immediately think of Judy Garland, and you think of her performance here as Dorothy, performing that song. So I think definitely up there. Now for the three things that didn't work, and I will say I'm going to focus more on kind of like the behind the scenes of the film, because honestly, watching the film back, there's not a lot wrong with it. So we'll just start with the first thing that I thought didn't work. I don't know if the whole concept of it was all a dream started with this, or if it had been established prior to that, but it does feel a little bit like really that's like we've gone through this whole film, and then we realized that it was just all in Dorothy's head. I know they would kind of use that later films, particularly in the 80s film Return to Oz, as kind of the basis behind that. But and in a way, it does kind of make sense that these people that she's seeing in Oz, like the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, the Wicked Witch of the West, and even the Wizard, are these same people that look similar to the people that she knows in real life, and that's where she's kind of bringing that with her. But I don't know, the whole idea of it just being a dream, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me completely. I get it, but it's still just one of those weird things that I think I just even to this day still kind of have a little trouble talking to kind of grasping. Number two. Again, you hear the stories about, especially recently, about like the making of the film and how like all the issues they had. They went through like 3 different directors, and I mentioned earlier about how Buddy Ebsen pulled out because he kept getting sick due to the makeup, and and also, and then you hear the stories about like how the actors who played the Munchkins were like really treated on stage, and in particular the treatment of Judy Garland, reportedly that she had been that she was being not put on a strict diet, so that she she supposedly was given Benzedrine tablets to keep down her weight. They actually binded her chest to make her look more homely. There was an infamous moment where when they first meet the Lion, that she kept giggling due to the uppers and downers they were giving her, and reportedly Victor Fleming, the director of the film, slapped her in the face, which certainly would fly today. Now, to his credit, he said he apparently he was he did feel remorse for it, and it said that the entire cast the crew could punch him in the face as punishment, but Garland ended up forgiving him by kissing him by kissing him. So, again, obviously, it was a much, not much different time. We obviously refer to this period of, as the golden age of Hollywood, but then you hear kind of these stories about these films and the treatment of the actors and the actresses and the crew. And, obviously it's, stuff like that certainly would certainly not fly today. So, and then number 3, again, I think this could have been more of a, this is not really, again, it didn't work, but I think they missed the boat in terms of, the Academy. Like I mentioned, this film was nominated for 5 awards, one of them being Best Picture. And looking back, I think they probably could have really set a good precedent by having this film win Best Picture that year. Just to kind of give everyone an idea of what was nominated. So there were, so the films nominated that year were The Wizard of Oz, Wuthering Heights, Stagecoach, Of Mice and Men, Ninotchka, I think I pronounced that correctly, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Love Affair, Goodbye Mr. Chips, Dark Victory, and the film that won the award, Gone with the Wind, which is a whole other can of worms that we might talk about down the line there. But again, looking at that list, there's some pretty good films in there, but I think, again, I think this is kind of where we start seeing the disrespect that fantasy films kind of get from the Academy. Even though they couldn't be, some of the best, most popular films of the year, they usually don't win an award like that, like Best Picture. So, again, maybe they could have, set a new precedent, if they had named this film Best Picture. But again, I kind of digress on that one. So, so now let me go through kind of some of my awards. I do have a couple of extra ones I've added, so I do want to kind of, give this film really its due. So my MVP for the film, I think, is definitely Margaret Hamilton, who, of course, like I said, plays the Wicked Witch of the West, and Miss Gulch in a dual role. I think she's absolutely fantastic in that role. She really dives deep into it, really embraces it. She steals every scene that she's in. And of course, she's got that kind of look with the green skin, and again, and even she had her own little mishap with the scene where she melts after getting the water doused on her. Reportedly, she got burned really badly from it. So, but she's definitely a champ, and she definitely, I think, is the main highlight of the film, even more so than Judy Garland, even though she's great herself as Dorothy. I do again want to give a honorable mention though to Ray Bolger, like I said, who plays the Scarecrow. Just the way he really, you could tell he really went all out, making this the Scarecrow very memorable with his, the way he walks and the way he talks and everything. And he really does a really good job in bringing that character to life. And speaking of favorite character, my favorite character is also the Wicked Witch of the West. Even though she's, she's kind of one of the early standard bearers for what a movie villain should be. Just, with, again, the iconic, the look, her laugh, her, mannerisms. And again, that's all due to Margaret Hamilton, and her performance as the Wicked Witch. Least favorite character, didn't really have one particular, but maybe it's because having watched the 2 Wicked films have really changed my opinion on her. But I wasn't a big fan of Glinda. I think she comes in, she's very condescending almost to the Wicked Witch. I mean, I know she's supposed to be the good witch, but she's supposed to help. You think she's going to help Dorothy, but she's said, kind of just feels very vague. And then by the end of it, when she does finally appear, after Dorothy seemingly loses her last way to get home, she's just kind of like, oh, it was inside of you all along. So it just feels kind of like, just feels like a slap in the face of Dorothy that, it was all just like a big learning journey for her. So I don't know, just again, something that just doesn't sit with me right. Favorite song, because it is a musical, it's easy to go with Over the Rainbow just because that's like the centerpiece song, but I actually am going to go with Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. I think that's a really good scene. That's also I think that's, a really fun scene with all the munchkins and, doing this whole big, song and dance performance for Dorothy. I think it's really, really memorable. Not that there's a bad song in the film; they're all really good. I just happen to think that's one of the better ones. And my favorite scene, I think it's definitely when Dorothy is in the Twister and we see like all the projections, like the pictures on the side with like the she sees her the family and all the different animals. I think it's really well done. Kind of in the early days of special effects, that was really really revolutionary for its time. So I definitely want to I definitely love that. And then finally, kind of for my my overall grade, I think it still holds up very well. Even today, I mean, this came, like I said, this came out in 1939, and I think it's just one of those films that definitely stands the test of time. So I think I'm actually going to go and give it 10 out of 10. I think it's just an absolutely really perfect, pretty perfect film. Great, like I said, great performances, great songs, great visuals. The music is really the score itself, in terms of the music, is really beautifully done, and it still, I think, goes down as like one of the greatest films of all time, and one of the most important films of all time. Like I said, it's it is in the it was one of the first 25 films that was chosen by the Library of Congress to be preserved. It's got some great quotes. It's got great. It's just really just overall just really perfect. And I think if you haven't seen it in a while, particularly if you have seen the Wicked films, I definitely would take another look at it, because it is still, to me, one of the best films of all time, and still one of the greatest, one of the greatest pieces of art of all time, in my opinion. So, so that's going to wrap it up here for me. Be sure to continue following me on all the pods that I do on this feed and all the other feeds. Be sure to follow us on all of our on the PTB Facebook group. And I will say, depending on when this drops, our Greatest Dessert Tournament has just launched on the Facebook group. So if you want to get in on that, please do do so. As we look to see what the greatest dessert of all time is. So, but with that, I am Steve Riddle. This has been the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience, and we'll see you next time.
If happy little